Welcome back to another video. Today I am going to be test germinating some squash seeds. So there is a variety of squash that I have, but I have not grown in the past few years for a variety of reasons. Different types or different varieties of squash can easily hybridize with each other, and so I tried to minimize that potential by spacing squash varieties out pretty far separate from each other, and also not growing as many varieties out at once. So the squash that I want to focus on today is the scallop squash, or it's also commonly known as the patty pan squash. Some people like to call it the Pac-Man squash. So this is a squash variety I haven't grown in a while because I had gotten into growing spaghetti squash and butternut for a time, as well as some other eclectic varieties, and I just didn't want any of those genetics to mix in with the patty pan. Unfortunately, I kind of lost track of them, and I haven't grown them in about 6 years, right? It was since about 2017 that I last grew them, and it's now 2023. So generally for squash seeds, the viability is about 7 years or so. So I decided it's pretty close to that point that I would test germinate these seeds that I had saved back in 2017, just to kind of get a feel of what the odds would be in terms of germination rate when I plant them. Now, when test germinating the seeds, the larger the sample size, the more accurate your results will be. Despite that, I only tested about 15 seeds. Generally, you want to work with numbers much larger than that, but for me, because I only had so many seeds available, I figured that I would take a more conservative approach. But basically, my main concern was if the germination was really bad, then I wouldn't waste my time planting them. And really bad would have been like 1 or 2 or 3 out of the 15 seeds that would germinate. That would raise some red flags for me, and I might try to plant some other squash varieties or buy some new patty pan seed or something like that. But otherwise, I figured if I got germination results higher than that, say you know, maybe 7 to 15 out of those 15 germinating, then I would probably go ahead and plant them. And depending on if it was more in that mid-range of germination, then I might plant them a little bit more densely, you know, and then thin out as appropriate if needed. So what I did was I took these 15 squash seeds and I put them in a damp paper towel inside a plastic container. I put a plastic bag inside of this plastic container on top of that folded paper towel that was damp, so that would help trap a little bit more of the heat and moisture and keep it closer to the seeds, so that the water wouldn't evaporate to the top of the container and then the paper towel and the seeds would dry out, thereby skewing my germination results. So once I got that all squared away, I then put it in my heat mat heated incubation chamber that I made myself, and then I let it sit in there for about 7 days. Partway through that, I checked the seeds at the 5 or 6 day marker just to kind of get a feel of what the germination was like, and I noticed that 7 of those seeds had germinated successfully. So I decided to wait the full week. 1 more seed had germinated, bringing the total up to 8 that had germinated successfully. So I decided to call it at that. I figure about a week is how long it usually takes to germinate squash seeds, so I went with that. So the germination results were basically in the middle, right? 7 to 8 out of 15, which to me is not bad considering it's been about 6 years. So I'm going to go ahead in the springtime once everything warms up, and I'm going to plant that then in the garden and hopefully get some pretty good yields this year. Also, as a final note, I did not save any of those squash seeds to transplant, mainly because it's so early in the year that if I did pot them up, they would become root bound long before it was safe for them to be transplanted outside. Also, they don't usually respond well to having a lot of their roots disturbed and being transplanted in general. So I decided to forego that option and just respectfully composted them. But nonetheless, they provided some very valuable insight into how these future squash seeds will or may respond when planted in the springtime. So with that, I appreciate you watching this video, and I hope to see you in a future video. Take care.